Kyle Stone, I want to welcome you to Marsy's Law interview series, Why We Do What We Do. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Kyle, it is a real pleasure to have you. I've been hearing so much about you and your leadership in Ohio, especially most recently with your helping prosecutor Joe Dieters, who's a friend of Marsy's Law, get issue 1 passed in Ohio. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, I want to congratulate you on being elected to the county prosecutor's office in Stark County. You are the only African-American elected prosecutor in the entire state of Ohio. Is that right?
Correct. The first African-American man, and the second African-American, the late Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones, was elected back in 1990 in Cuyahoga County. And it took pretty much 30 years when I won in 2020.
And where is Stark County? That's in Canton, right by the NFL Hall of Fame?
Correct. Yeah, and it's about, I would say, about 50 minutes south of Cleveland.
Okay, and you took over in 2020.
Yes.
And you defeated a 17-year incumbent.
Correct.
Now, what in the world possessed you to ever get into a race to try to knock off a 17-year incumbent?
Well, so it was a very unique position and opportunity. So I was, wanting to support, because during my time as a defense attorney, I was having some interactions with the office, and I just felt like there was more that could be done. There was more. I felt that the citizens of Stark County deserved a more active prosecutor, more of a boots on the ground kind of prosecutor. And I was looking to support the gentleman who had ran in 2016 against my predecessor, and no one was running, and they were recommending, well, we believe somebody young should run, and it was going over my head initially. And then I prayed about it, as some people begin to say and recommend me, like, come out and say, Kyle, maybe you should entertain running. And so I prayed about it, and I met with my bishop, had a discussion with him, and felt led to run, and here we are.
And you're also an ordained pastor as well, is that right?
Correct.
And could you tell us a little bit about your upbringing? You grew up in a single parent household?
Yes. So it was my mom. I had 2 older sisters, and here in Canton. And my mom has always been one that worked, even in times of struggle. She still managed to, pick up jobs if necessary. And the last position that she held before going into business on her own, she worked for, Stark County Family Court. And so as a kid, I grew up knowing some of the individuals who are currently judges now. So it was just really like a 180 turn from being a kid and being, knowing these individuals, to now being the county prosecutor in my office, working directly with the same court. But just, being the youngest, the only boy, it was instilled in us that you're either going to work or you're going to go to school, but you won't be a bum. You're going to get it done no matter what. And so I've always wanted to be a lawyer since the 2nd grade, and went after it and did what needed to be done.
Well, it's pretty amazing. So you were going into that Stark County courthouse as a little boy when your mom was working there, and you're now the Stark County prosecutor, and you still see some of the people that you visited when you were a little boy?
Absolutely. So for example, it's the family court, and the chief judge, or the most senior judge, when I was going up there, he was just a magistrate. And pretty much all of the current judges that are judges were magistrates when my mom was working there, and different individuals have since retired, but some individuals still work there. And it's just really neat to be a part of the process, and being a part of the system, as well as knowing these individuals from just growing up with my mom working in the system.
And you were also, let's also put this in perspective. You're no old timer just yet yourself. You were elected at the age of 37, right?
Correct.
And so you still haven't even hit your 40th birthday.
Not yet. July is coming. And I still now, the nice thing is I can still pass for in my 20s. But I have to
Oh, for
remind
sure.
people that, yeah, I'm almost 40.
Now, so Kyle, when you were running, you ran on three pillars. Your campaign of unity, transparency, and justice. Tell us a little bit about how you work those three pillars into your campaign and how you work those three concepts of unity, transparency, and justice into your administration of the office and the Stark County Prosecutor's Office.
So unity, I felt like criminal justice reform and the criminal justice system, we achieve it when we work together. When we work together to accomplish certain goals. That means working with organizations outside of our office, being willing to work with our judges, work with our law directors, work with other individuals within the community, allow the community's voice to be heard. We did some, around the community. Well, I can talk about that when we apply what we do in the office. But it was important to me because I believe if we're going to achieve any goals in changing our system and making sure that it's equitable, that it's fair, and that we're doing right, we have to be willing to do it as a team. This isn't a lone experience. We have to do it as a team. And so that's why unity was one of them. When it comes to transparency, in our efforts of unifying people, we have to make sure that we're transparent with our process so that people can trust the system. If they can trust the system and trust the process, then they're more apt to unify and be a part of it because they can trust it. How do we help them trust it? To make sure that justice is the number one priority, that it's not about the political status. It's not about financial status. It's not about race, age, gender, because we understand that justice doesn't have a gender. Justice doesn't have a race. Justice doesn't have an age. It's either right or it's wrong. And so I believe that unity, transparency, and justice, but it really goes backwards. That justice has to be priority. When justice is the priority, then you're going to be. It's going to be easy to be transparent. And then when you're transparent, you have the ability to unify the community and the system together because people can see the process. And so as we fast forward to what we're doing within the office, how do we unify? We have been participating in multiple organizations and multiple different meetings. I'm very active within the community, within our leadership, youth leadership, whether it's some reentry programs, whether it's local nonprofits. I tend to be involved. I periodically go and visit our township meetings, just pop up to see what's going on, to be aware of what's going on. When I first got in office, I met with all of our police chiefs. I went to them and met with them. I had a meeting with all of our superintendents, just opening the door to let people know that I'm here to work with you so that we can collectively help build and keep our community safe. When it comes to transparency, one of the things that we are finally getting at the end and getting finalized is a database that will reflect the charges that, all the cases from when they start, what was their indicted charges, and then what did they either plead guilty to or get convicted of. And then it's going to show their age, their race, their, where they're from, so that it can keep us honest, so that we can ensure that we're treating everyone fairly, equally across the board, that no one is getting special treatment because they got the most expensive lawyer, and then this one gets the worst treatment because they got a public defender. We want to say that no matter who's representing you on our side, we're going to do the same. And so our database should be up and running by February. We should have this past year's information. And then when it comes to justice, we're just continuing to do what's right, continuing to do what's fair. If presented with the opportunity to slide around or skirt around, we're not doing that. We aren't overcharging people at the indictment level. We're making sure that the charges that people are being indicted for are those that we have a genuine good faith belief that they committed those crimes. And so it's very important to me for that to be the foundation of where we start, because that's where the cases start for us. And I just want to make sure that we're doing right even from there. And then when presented with information, when things don't seem right, we had a case where a gentleman, the victim, the information that was provided wasn't, it didn't line up. And the more one of the assistant prosecutors investigated, the more they believed that it was, the current charge at the time was actually should be lessened. And so the defense attorney was on board, my office was on board, however, the judge was not on board. And so instead of risking that this young man would go to jail for 8 to 10 years, or excuse me, 8 to 12 years because of the rules, we dismissed it. If we don't have a good faith to believe that something has taken place, I have an ethical duty and an ethical responsibility to do the right thing. And that's one thing that the people of Stark County can rely on, is for justice to be the focus and for Kyle to do the right thing.
Yeah, you and I talked about the fact that success in your office is not defined by winning a conviction at all costs. It's defined by justice being served in every single case.
Right.
It appears as though that is not something that you just bring into just the beginning of the case, but you see it all the way through the investigation, and even after post-conviction. You've talked to me about the fact that you actually work and always have your ears open and your eyes open to the Innocence Project, and the work that they do as well. That's certainly admirable when people in a community put their trust and vote in somebody like you, that justice is going to be first and foremost on your agenda.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, a couple of interesting parts of the Constitution of the state of Ohio have to do with your administration of justice in your office. Most recently, issue 1 that we talked about, you got elected in 2020, and then 2022, there happens to be an issue on the ballot that you got actively involved in. Prosecutor Dieters from Hamilton County spoke to us about it before the election, and then after the election, I wanted to make sure that we had a little follow-up, and that's one of the reasons why we had you on. Other than the fact that you've been referred to as one of the rising stars in the prosecutorial world, and not just in Ohio, but in the country. So no pressure on that, Kyle, but tell us a little bit about what issue 1 does and how quickly the democratic process worked in Ohio.
So the decision came out, and I'm sure Prosecutor Dieters, explained the DuBose decision that came out in January of this year, and immediately they went to task on, hey, we have to make this change. Based off of my reading of the decision, the majority based their decision on the change of language through the criminal rule 46 with regard to bond and whatnot, and that there was a separation and a shift to where community safety could be considered, but then it separated so that that last sentence in Rule 46 said basically when it comes to, setting bail, it couldn't contemplate, the protection and safety of the public. And so because they hung their hat on that, there was a need to make a change. And so like you mentioned, Prosecutor Dieters worked on it with our Attorney General, and then they went to the legislature and, got it on the ballot. And overwhelmingly, the people of Ohio said, we want our judges to be able to contemplate, public safety when deciding bond and bond amounts. And I think that's important to say that people understood. It's a very simple shift. It's a very simple language that it changes that responsibility from the Supreme Court to our legislators. And so that was one of the points of concern for individuals, but some action had to be taken. And we see that the people wanted the majority of people wanted this to take place, and it was reflected in how overwhelmingly the issue one passed. And so I think that, when we contemplate understanding that people want to be protected, violence has increased all across this country. And as a prosecutor, my duty and my job is to seek justice. And in seeking justice, it's also to protect the public as well and keep those who are the most dangerous and the most heinous individuals off the streets. And if that means during the pendency of a trial or a pendency of a case, we're asking for the sake of the public or the sake of victims and protecting them, for the sake of protecting potential witnesses, we're asking you to contemplate public safety and that amount of bail, then by all means, it's important for that to take place. And the people of Ohio agree with that.
Yeah, and I think also it's important that this is the democratic process in action. This is not
Right.
The prosecutor's office saying this is the way that bail should be set. This is now in response to a decision. Boy, democracy works fast in Ohio, because
Right.
that decision came out in January 2022. You guys all got it on the ballot for this past November. Like you said, it passed overwhelmingly. I think 78% of the people of Ohio voted. The other thing that I found interesting is both candidates for governor of Ohio, the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate, supported
Absolutely.
this constitutional amendment. So basically now judges have to consider public safety. They're required to consider public safety as well as the seriousness of the offense, in addition to the likelihood of a defendant reappearing in court and the defendant's criminal record. Now, one of the things that I also wanted to ask you about was another constitutional amendment which passed overwhelmingly, which is very near and dear to our heart, is Marsy's law.
Right.
And that passed in 2017, also overwhelmingly by the people of Ohio. Could you tell us a little bit about how you work in your office with Marsy's law and how it helps you when you talk to victims about, once again, being open and transparent about what's going on with the cases?
Yeah, so we currently have a victim witness division in my office. We have a director, Kim Stanley, who's a phenomenal. She came from a domestic violence shelter here in Stark County, in Alliance, Ohio, and she's just phenomenal. And we have advocates that work with victims in every case that we have. If there's been a victim identified, our advocates work with them throughout the process. We keep them informed. When there's a hearing, we allow them opportunities to meet, to discuss their perspectives, their desire for certain outcomes, their input. When, for example, we have some, homicide cases that were recently resolved, and we tend to meet with the families, bring them in and say, hey, this is where we're at. This is our recommendation to the judge. What is your thoughts? Making sure that they're fully informed and aware of what's going on. And we also, in adhering to Marsy's law, when there's a victim impact statement, we allow that to take place, or whether they just want to share at the sentencing or be present during the trial. And we always make sure that our advocates are providing those opportunities, communicating, and making sure that victims and victim families are very well informed within the process of what the system is doing, what's going on. If there's a struggle if we're concerned about being able to prove a case, or we have some concern about X, Y, and Z, we generally will share that with those family members.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talk about, the importance of having meaningful and enforceable constitutional rights for victims, is that this doesn't take away any constitutional rights of defendants. That constitutional rights are not a zero-sum game. Just to make sure that victims have constitutional rights does nothing to put constitutional rights of defendants in jeopardy. And you would tell me how important that is. You're a former defense attorney yourself.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things is like the constitutional rights of defendants is, to have an attorney, to have a trial with a jury of their peers and whatnot. It's all of those are in place, and it has nothing to do with a victim's right to be made aware of what's going on, to be a part of the process, to be able to speak and share their opinion and perspective. It doesn't give the victim the authority or the ability to dictate what happens to the defendant. It just gives them the opportunity to share their thoughts and to be involved with the process. And so the two do not oppose each other. They go right in line, and it works perfectly within our criminal justice system to allow both sides to have those rights available to them.
And I know how important it is to you, and the importance you place on helping victims navigate through the system by the victim advocates that you have in your office, and the victim support system that you talk about that you have in place in your office. Because so many times, when a victim is thrust into this, they didn't choose to have to navigate the criminal justice system, and it's a foreign system to them, and it can be quite intimidating. On top of the trauma that they've already experienced by virtue of being a victim or being a family member of a victim. And the other thing that you and I talk about that is very important is the whole idea of closure for victims, to see the case through from the beginning to the end. And could you tell us a little bit about a phone call that you received as recently as the night before Thanksgiving, talking about closure for victims many years later after a case has happened?
Yes, so I got a call from a gentleman. I was sitting here. My office had we closed a little bit early because of the day before the holiday, but I had some things that I needed to get taken care of. So it was nice and quiet. So it was just easier for me to just stay and get that stuff done. But I got a phone call, a man by the name of John Gilland, who committed a very heinous murder. He killed two individuals and shot another gentleman who survived. He was shot in the head but survived. And he called because John had passed away in jail, in prison. And the victim who survived called my office and said, please, tell me this is true, that finally something I've been waiting on for 37 years has finally taken place, and felt like now I can move on. Now I can, breathe, because this is what I've been waiting on. And it's it's a balance of understanding people, and having compassion for people who do their time and whatnot, but knowing that this brought some closure to a gentleman who this office supported 37 years ago, or advocated for 37 years ago. And I think I was at the age of 2 at the time when this took place. And all these years back, he called directly to my phone. I'm wanting to confirm that, and I was able to do that. And it really it will have a lasting impression, because I've been thinking about it ever since I got the phone call, is to be able to understand exactly what the trauma that victims experience, that they live with it. It's not just as soon as a person go to jail that they no longer, or that achieves the closure. This gentleman, and every victim is different, but this gentleman, having been able to live long enough to see this gentleman, Mr. John Gillen, die in prison, get provided closure for him. And so I'm grateful that whatever provided closure for him, that he achieved that, not because of something that he did or anything like that, but just because finally he was able to achieve that. And so it's just very important from a victim standpoint that we can't put parameters in what is closure for them. We can't dictate, okay, well, now we've achieved this, or you got the outcome that you wanted, now it's time to move on. These individuals have to deal with the trauma and the experience and the memories, or the nightmares of what they went through for many years to come. So it was very, very heartwarming for me to have that phone conversation with him.
And it's incredible to think that you now, as the Stark County prosecutor yourself, you happen to be the person that communicated with this person on the night before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
You were actually the one that got the phone call and called this person back. And to think that when this person was experiencing this case as a victim in the Stark County system. Your mom, for all you know, could have been carrying you in a car seat as a 2-year-old boy into the Stark County courthouse when this person was going through this.
Right.
And that 37 years later, Stark County prosecutor Kyle Stone is there the night before Thanksgiving to give this victim the support that he's still looking for 37 years later. It's
Absolutely.
a really incredible story. And it was a reminder, and I think it is a reminder of how important your job is and how important prosecutors' jobs are to support victims throughout the process, like you guys do. You do an incredible job, Prosecutor Stone. Congratulations. We're pulling for you at Marsy's Law. We're always here to help you. Thank you for doing all that you do for victims, and you continue to do.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us today, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Take care, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.